Welcome to another Divine Dialogues gathering. We are so lucky to be able to have the community that will come forward and share their stories about what it means for them to live a spiritual life. And we always like to examine it in these different facets from these different parts of the world. And so this month we are having a conversation with Corey. She's somebody that I met several years ago at an adult spiritual summer camp of all places. And recently we had a conversation and somehow the topic of boundaries came up. And she is someone I would say who does boundaries like a boss. And as soon as I heard that, knowing the tenderhearted folks in my community and the sometimes struggle that they have with boundaries, I said, oh my God, you got to come and do a divine dialogue. We need to have a conversation about boundaries. And so thankfully she said yes, and she is here. So Corey, can you tell us a little bit about you, about what your spiritual path looks like and how you got here, for starters?
You bet. So by day, I am a cat herder in that I'm a project program manager at a nationwide law firm. And I wrangle many large teams, sometimes up to 50 people, for initiatives firm-wide. And that in and itself has a lot of boundary lessons that I've learned over many, many years. I've worked in legal 30 plus years. So I've really learned a lot of boundaries with respect to the work I do in corporate America. On the other side of that, that is not my passion. My passion is more around the spiritual side of our lives as healers and light workers. And I am a certified chakra healer. I am a level 1 Reiki master, if you want to call that at level 1. There's so much more to learn. I am a certified yoga instructor, and I am always in pursuit of connecting with my loved ones on the other side. I am not there yet. It's a long process to learn, but I yearn to connect with some very important people that I have lost in the last 8 years of my life. So with respect to that side, I have learned boundary setting when it comes to the spiritual side, as well as with family on the earth plane. So there's a lot of levels of boundaries that I've learned over the last literally 8 to 10 years of my life that I have held on to and anchored to that have gotten me way further than I ever thought I could achieve.
I definitely want to dig into like the tangible 3D boundaries, but I love that you brought the spiritual boundaries into this, because in my early days of intuitive development, and particularly with mediumship, but to be honest, it was happening before that too. I didn't know that we had the ability to set boundaries. I kind of thought that like if you had the ability to access the other side, that was it. And if they showed up, you had to deal with them. I kind of thought of it like the movie Ghost, and how she has all those people like in her waiting room. And I just sort of thought that that's how it had to be. And I feel like as sensitive people, and certainly as intuitives, like that's almost like the quickest road to burnout, is to be at spirit's whim. They have a completely different capacity than we do. And I love that you have that awareness, and that we're even like starting the conversation with this, of saying like, hey, if this is you, you are still the boss. You still have agency and autonomy. It's so huge. Like
100%. 100%. Yep.
yeah,
It was a little story on that spiritual side. I've lost both my parents in the last 8 years, and you know that. And I would wake up at night and they would literally be hovering over me, like watching a baby that's sleeping, a newborn baby, and they'd just be watching me. And I had to learn boundaries with my parents on the other side of you're not allowed to do X, Y, or Z because you're affecting my own quality of life. And I know your intent is love, but I need to function. So that was kind of my first foray into setting boundaries with my own parents on the other side. So yeah.
I love that. I have a grandmother who I am working on the relationship now that she's on the other side. And she did the same thing. And I was furious because, like, the one thing we don't do in this house with spirit is we don't interrupt Serena's sleep. That's like the number one rule. And I have
100%.
one living grandparent left, and I've given her all the ground rules so that when she crosses over, it's like, this is what we can and can't do. And hopefully she'll remember at that point. But I like, it's now that I know that I have an option, I want to make sure that that's really, really clear, particularly with sleep. I'm very cranky if I get woken up.
Yeah. Yeah. It was not okay.
No. And I love that you have that kind of relationship where, like, for me, I straight up banished her. Like, now she's allowed in one room of my house in one corner, and like, that's it. But that took probably 6 years before I would even let her do maybe more, to be honest. So, the fact that you were able to be like, hey, I still want to have this relationship with you. We just have to do it in a way that doesn't impact my quality of life, because it should enrich us. It shouldn't detract at all.
Yep. 100%.
So when we were planning, our conversation, we had talked offline about some sensitive areas around boundary, and particularly when it's with family, there's a lot of different dynamics that can make things, I don't want to say challenging. Sometimes it's challenging, but it's complicated. It's a little bit more involved. And so I just want to kind of set as not a disclaimer, but just like a warning for people who might be sensitive and working on their own stuff around these areas. We will be having conversations around addiction, mental health type stuff. And if that is something that's really hard for you and you want to skip this episode, we are 100% okay with that. You got to protect yourself. But we believe that it's really important to be having really candid, honest conversations in spaces that feel really safe, because it is part of the process. And especially when we're having conversation around boundaries, these are often the relationships that can be the most triggering and the most challenging. And boundaries can actually be the thing that is the bridge sometimes. And so we do want to talk about that, but I want to make sure that you have that information up front when you're watching this, so that you can do what is right for you. So with that said, let's talk about where, like, your greatest teaching has come from in this language of boundary.
I'm just going to dive right in. I think the greatest teaching for me has been three-pronged. The first is a very toxic work environment where it was incredibly hostile. I was working at a company and we merged with a smaller organization, and the leadership in that organization basically functioned as more of a takeover. And I was the lead project manager in this company that I worked for, and they, for some reason, had it out for me to take me down. And I had a lot of friends in this company, and one in particular would work with the C-suite. And she came to me several times, and she had been in meetings where they were literally having conversations on how to take me out, as in terminate me.
Your employment, not your life.
That is correct. Let's make that very clear, to terminate my job. And so I immediately threw my boundaries up and engaged professionally as best I could, and started seeking out other employment. I landed in an amazing company, and within a year, the other company had terminated everyone in my company. So there was intent behind what they had done in the merger. And so I took those learnings of setting my boundaries in this new company. I will take my lunches. I will take my breaks. I will not answer my phone after this time. Only if there's a project or program emergency for launching or something, I will acquiesce to that. But my boundaries were strong and hard boundaries, and they continue to be, and I'm 10 years in the company now, they continue to set strong and they do not falter.
You think with that it's almost easier having started with a new company saying these are the boundaries rather than trying to establish them in a role you were already in?
Yes, because I had allowed the behavior for so long of giving my lunches, working extremely long hours, answering my phone at all hours of the day. I allowed that. I allowed for that behavior. And for me to try to adjust that behavior is difficult because you've acquiesced to those behaviors and you've trained them how to treat you.
Yeah, they expect it.
And to unravel that is incredibly challenging because they have an expectation of you. So I made a conscious decision when I started this new company. These are my boundaries unequivocally. And I do not have to explain myself nor say I'm sorry for setting these boundaries. These are what I need for my own mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health. Period. No questions asked.
You know, it's interesting. These things that you're talking about, like taking breaks and not answering your phone, like these are the things that like are in your contract. Like that this is what is available to you. This is what your role is. And like, and my experience in corporate was exactly the same. I think that it's a really, I think there's shifts that are happening now, and like newer people and new awareness is coming into higher levels in corporations that the cultures are changing. But certainly that was my experience as well in corporate. And we shouldn't have to apologize. We shouldn't even have to set the boundary because it's already in the contract. It was already the terms of employment. And yet, like, I remember going to see The Devil Wears Prada when I worked in corporate. And we left, and my friend was teasing me because he was like, oh my God, that's your boss. Like, that is totally your boss. I was like, she's not that bad. Literally the next morning, this was a Saturday, I started getting calls at 6 a.m. being like, my BlackBerry's not getting email. I'm like, I'm not tech support. What the fuck am I going to do? But to have been defending her the night before, saying she's not Miranda from The Devil Wears Prada, and then getting calls at 6 a.m. the next day on a weekend was just so funny. And yeah, like the fact that you even like, I love that you're not apologetic about it and you're just like, this is the way it is. But like, you shouldn't have to be anyway. Like, it should just be the way it is. We should be able to honor the terms that we were hired under.
100%. I agree. And I work for a chief, or not for her, I work with her very closely on a program. And mad respect for her. But I've seen that there are no boundaries. And she's such an amazing human being, and I really respect her. And so we've developed a good relationship, a great working relationship over the last 18 months. And on occasion, I'll send her a little note or something I see on Facebook, a little inspirational quote of boundary setting or caring for yourself. And she's always like, oh, you've got the best stuff. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed to hear. And so I can't change her, but I can show up in a way that is empowering and supportive of boundary setting as a woman in just a subtle way of saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. I thought you'd really like this. But that's her journey, and I'm thrilled to share it with her. But I also set my own boundaries with her too.
Well, the beautiful thing is by you living that, not just setting the boundaries with her, but setting boundaries, period, you become then also an example of what's possible for her. So that, you know, this idea of it being available specifically to women, you know, we don't have to buy into the myth that we have to people please and we have to acquiesce. Like, you get to be a testament to what's possible and available to her should she choose it. Again, it's her work, right? Like, she'll choose it or not. But at least she knows she has an option because she gets to see you being the option, living and breathing it every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep marching to the beat of my own drum here and just continuing to empower others in just subtle ways. I'm not here to, change the world, but I can be a pebble in a pond in effect, with just a small ripple. So, yeah,
So you said there were three prongs.
yeah,
So one of them was the
there
shitty
are.
work situation. What were your
Yeah,
other
the
two?
work of work. The next one is caring for aging parents.
Mm.
And this may be a trigger. You mentioned addiction, but I cared for my aging parents. I moved them into my home. They were both terminally ill. And my father lived with us for 2 years, and my mother, excuse me, yeah, 2 years, and my mother for 3 years. And in that scenario, the parent-child relationship flipped,
Mm-hmm.
in that I became the parent and they, the children, for lack of better terms, but I was their provider. They could still get up and move and walk and things like that. But it was incredibly difficult to be a caregiver to very, to, to adults who have lived independent lives for 75 plus years
Mm.
and now are living under their kid's roof, who has boundaries and rules. And when they first moved in, it got very toxic. And I'm an only child. I love my parents beyond measure. Without them, I would not be here. But we were trying to support them by providing healthy food and medical and driving them and taking them. But at the same time, they lost their independence. We had to clean out their home and sell their home, and they lost everything that they worked for their entire lives and had to live with us, not destitute, but they were essentially homeless living with us, for lack of a better term, right?
Mm.
And they just, we were trying with a great amount of love, trying to care for them, but they didn't want to be cared for. So I ended up going to therapy, and my therapist said, your mother doesn't need a mother. And that was like, for me, that was a light flipped on.
Mm.
My therapist, like, she needs her daughter. She needs her confidant. She needs someone who loves her to support her. You're not her mom. And that's what I was being, was a mother to my mother and my father. And that just, it was not working. And they threatened just to get in their car and leave
Mm.
and go back to Montana from Washington. But in those moments of my therapy and my mother was in therapy, we were able to come back together and redefine our relationship, our parameters, our boundaries, living together. And it became a more harmonious house, where we were able to create many lovely memories, before my father passed, and then the year between, great memories with my mother. But it was a huge lesson in boundary setting,
Mm-hmm.
I think, for
And
them
that
and for
dynamic is so tricky too, of being like, this is my home, and I am the adult of this house.
me. These
And
are my
also
rules.
the dynamic of being the child, but having the responsibility of the caretaker. And
Mhm.
like, it, that is a really tricky one. And then when you factor in also any kind of a terminal illness at the same time, there's what we're
Mhm.
talking about is the really practical day-to-day, like this is what we have to do to just like get along under the roof. But then there's also this other unspoken element of
Mhm.
like caretaking for somebody who is in that position, even without the child and parent dynamic, even without like that boundary work, like that is such sacred responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think we saw it with COVID, where we started to recognize like how much of a cost it is to be a caretaker. So we saw it with all of our healthcare workers burning out and everything.
Mhm.
But like people I don't think we really give enough credit to the amount of care and energy and heart that is required of people who are in that position. And so to be able to show up and lovingly hold that space and doing it in a way, finding a way that you can do it that is not only nurturing for the relationship, but protective of yourself at the same time. Like, you're basically a superhero. I don't know if you recognize this. This is a big fucking deal. Like, that's a lot.
I do now. I do now. But in the moment, it was,
Survival.
this is my responsibility. My own personal, and this is different for everybody, but this was my responsibility. They had me at a late age. They cared for me. They raised me. This is the least I could do, was to care for them.
Yeah.
I know not everybody feels that way, and for me that's okay, but I didn't, there were no other options because I never allowed for any other options to come through to me, only figuring out how I can best support them in their terminal illness with the resources that I knew were available through hospice, through the hospital, through the community, because I worked long-term care industry for 6 months, many years ago, and I took those learnings and I had them because I knew in those 6 months in that job, that was what I needed to understand and know, because I knew I was going to care for aging parents. So I knew where my resources were, how to access them, when to access them, etc. So I had a bunch of pre-planning I did many years ago. But I just never thought of an alternative. And I told both of them that you will pass in our home with your dignity and surrounded with love. And I will commit to that for both of you. And I did.
Yeah.
And there were boundaries figuring out what that would look like too.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, that was a huge learning.
I know that it doesn't always involve bringing the parents into the home, but caring for aging parents is a really huge thing. And
It is.
I've seen it with clients for a number of years. So if you knew someone who was going to find themselves in that position, whether it was in their home or not, like, what advice around boundaries would you give them so that they could actually start the journey on the right foot rather than having to like recalibrate it partway through?
I think part of that, in looking back in retrospect, is with aging parents to realize that they are losing their independence, to understand that, to realize that they are facing their last days, months, years on earth. And I have not lived that. I have not had that own mortality yet. But to understand that those parents going through that, to be compassionate with them and to love them and to not take it personally. And to try to put yourself in those loved ones' shoes for a minute, and having your child as an adult say, okay, we're going to move you in with us, or we're going to move you into a care facility, and we're going to go through all your belongings, and we're going to have an estate sale or a garage sale, or we're going to get rid of everything, and we're going to sell your house. How would you feel if you were told that and not asked to participate in it? So that's a big lesson learned for me, because I never put myself in my parents' shoes until after the fact.
Yeah.
I was just, I'm a project manager. We got to get this done. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And I never once stood back and thought how my behaviors were affecting them.
You know,
We got to clean out your house. Mom, I want to keep my cookbooks. No, we can't keep the cookbooks. Thumb through them, we'll tear them out, move on. But those cookbooks were her pride and joy.
Right.
So I think approaching it with a lot of compassion.
I feel like that compassion piece is almost the remedy to the needing of boundaries in the first place in some ways. Because if you think about it in the corporate application, if the managers and the C-suite people and whatever, if they had that empathy and that ability to put themselves in the worker bee's shoes, to recognize that, yes, there is the to-do list and the deadlines and the budgets and the whatevers, and also that someone has to actually be the one to get it done, and what will be sustaining for them. Like when we can, I feel like when we have that ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, it just brings like whole new levels of compassion, and it can really influence how we engage in the first place, which is where I say, with that, if that came first, the boundary wouldn't even be needed.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard though, and humbling. Like, I think the fact that you were able to see that is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because, I'm definitely someone who I think I have a lot of compassion as well. But, when there is these are the things that have to get done, I can be a bit, I don't want to say cutthroat, but like a little nose to the grindstone about things.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not as delicate as I could be a lot of the time, if I'm honest.
I know I wasn't.
Yeah.
My dad and I had a huge falling out in the backyard of their house in Montana because he was diagnosed with metastasized cancer. And we had gone home to Montana to go through everything. And he was not helping going through everything. He was going out and seeing all his friends. And I was mad at him because he was not participating in the work that needed to get done. But I did not realize until after the fact, he was going around saying goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah, we don't see it till after, but.
Yep. Yeah.
I find that I worked with someone years ago who was teaching me about our window of tolerance. I don't know if that's a term you're familiar with, but basically it's how we build capacity, and it's right from a nervous system level upward. And the more regulated we are emotionally, the greater our window of tolerance is, the greater our capacity is. So when we have, greater capacity, when we end up in those points of big frustration, we have that moment of being able to step outside where we can have that bird's eye view and go like, oh, this is why this behavior is happening, or whatever. You have an ability to see the greater picture. But I think that can be really hard when you're in a time of high emotion, high stress, high demand, because then the window is shrinking. And so the capacity is lessened, and therefore we become more reactive. And it's really challenging to be able to, like, quote unquote, be the bigger person or whatever, or put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're just like trying to get by in that moment.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was there. There was a framework and terminology around that, but yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's really beautiful how you've integrated these things. I know that they have not been easy lessons. But you're like, what I really love and appreciate about you as a human is that you do the work. Like, you show up, you look at the ugly stuff, and you're willing and brave to look at that. And like, not all of us can. Some of us will only do it very reluctantly, and you just keep showing up. And I think that that's really incredible about you.
Thank you.
Okay,
It's
so we
hard
have
work.
the third prong. There were 3 prongs.
We do.
Parents. And we have our third prong, which I think
And
was
the third.
the bigger ones.
Yeah. And this is the conversation, the boundaries and lessons around addiction. I have someone in my life who is struggling with addiction. I'm not going into great detail as to who it is, just to respect their path and their journey. But they, I can say, are very, very sensitive. They see spirit. They have seen spirit their entire life. It's handed down through the maternal side. And they've told me so many experiences with spirit and seeing, and I've been able to validate because I've seen some of the shadow people.
Mhm.
We were sitting somewhere and a shadow person walked by a window, and we both turned our heads at the same time, and they're like, "You saw that?" And I said, "Yes, I saw that." And this is when the person was younger, and they say, "I see them all the time." And so as they got older, they had a lot of life experiences, and addiction came into the picture. And I'm very close with this person, and I would do anything for this person. But I did everything that I could for this person, setting aside all boundaries, because I wanted to save this person, because they're important to me. And my mother was a gambling addict. And that's a whole nother story. But I was 18, 19 years old when that came to my awareness with my mother. So I really didn't have a lot of knowledge around behaviors, because I was going out on my own. I had a boyfriend. I was heading off to college. So she was in the shadows, and I was self-absorbed doing my own thing. So when that came to be, and my awareness of her addiction became front and center for me, she was being prosecuted for what had happened. So I wasn't on that addiction journey with her. I entered her journey at a point where she may go into prison for what she did. She didn't. But that was where I came into that addiction for her journey. So I didn't set any boundaries around that, because
You weren't exposed to it. You didn't
I
have.
wasn't exposed to it. I didn't walk that path with her like my father did. But with this individual, the addiction became known right around the time my father passed. And over the last 7 years, it's just incrementally gotten worse and worse and worse. And phone calls from EMTs and firefighters and employers and their doggy daycare, and friends and roommates. And then we've got all that, and then we get calls from them, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, hysterical. It just, and then abuse came in to the picture of emotional and mental abuse because of the disease that I experienced. And a great sense of failure on my part, because I couldn't save them from themselves. So I started researching through AA and families of addicts, on what can I do, what can't I do, how do I set healthy boundaries for me that may not be healthy for them, because I'm the whipping post. It's what it felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I sought a therapist for help and setting healthy boundaries. So that has been a 7-year journey in trying to figure out how I can stay physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually safe when calls come in
Mm-hmm.
from any of those individuals I mentioned, because it would trigger me. I would get triggered and go into anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And so I ended up having to, unfortunately, block this person on social media, on my phone, to preserve my own mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the last thing I wanted to do. But I had to, because it was killing me. Not literally killing me, but it was ripping my heart completely out, and I couldn't save that person.
Yeah. So, but
So
before I got to the
yeah,
point of blocking, like what, I guess, if you're comfortable telling us, like, what was the boundary and how did you have to uphold it in that type of scenario? Because it's not like it was just engaging with them. They had all these other people coming to you as well, right? So, like, what, rather than it being just like the term boundary, like what did that look like?
um, for the calls from employers and roommates and the such, we had a pinnacle point where she was in. I apologize. They were in the military, and they found her unresponsive in the barracks, and she was intubated and taken to the hospital. I apologize. They go as they now, so that there's some transition here for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things underlying this too. And I had caught them in so many lies and deceit and manipulation. I went to the hospital, and I just had a moment where, like, the straw that broke the camel's back was they indicated they intubated to restrain them. And I had talked to a nurse, and that was not true. And that was my breaking point. Standing in that hospital, right when COVID hit our shores, I'm standing in the hospital, subjecting myself to who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what COVID was at the time. Seeing this individual and the lying, ongoing, and deceiving and manipulation from a hospital bed. It wasn't just that comment, there were many more. And I just said, I'm done. I can't. I can't. I can't anymore. And I said, I love you, but I don't like what's going on. And I don't know what I can do to help you. You have to help yourself first, and then I'm right beside you 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't continue down this path until you get the help you need for recovery, not only with addiction, but mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I left. And there were a couple exchanges after that via text, and that's when I shut it down. Because the projection was so great that I texted back and said, I can't do this anymore. Don't contact me. And literally at that point in the hospital, all those other calls stopped. It was the strangest thing. EMTs didn't call anymore. friends didn't call anymore. I don't know. I might have set up some energetic something,
Hmm.
scaffolding that's just, nope, I'm done. Um, and I haven't spoke to them in 2.5 years. I do know some things that are going on, and they, from my understanding, are in rehab right now. This is their second time in rehab. Um, so my hope is that they're doing well and getting everything that they need.
Yeah.
Um, but they told me I need to go to AA, and then everything, I have to go to AA, and everything will be okay. Um,
No responsibility, all projecting outward, right?
oh, 100% projection. And
Yeah.
I miss them a lot. And I know in my heart, there will come a time where we will talk again.
Mhm.
I know that. I know that 100%.
I think there's something when we end up in these dynamics that someone has to draw the line if a major change is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because even when one or both parties is doing their own work, something about like when they come back together, the dynamic will still play out, right? Until somebody draws the line. And the fact that you hold in your heart that like that a reunion is possible, that
Mm-hmm.
it's time. I think it's possible because you drew the line.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
by doing that, it meant that not only were you protecting yourself, but you were saying that this can't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I was protecting them from me, because there were words exchanged that were not from my highest best place.
Of course.
Um, so I know that healing is entirely possible. I've seen it. I've seen it, and I saw it with my mother and father with her gambling addiction. Um, I know it's possible because I saw that, and I've seen it with other friends who have loved ones that have the addiction, the disease, and I know it's possible.
I've
And there's many times.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I constantly I talk to my angels and my guides, and I ask them to commune with hers,
I think
because
that's
it can
actually the
go. It's
safest way when there's a contentious relationship to be able to still
yeah,
support them. Higher self to higher
yeah,
self is like the safest way to go.
exactly, exactly, yeah, yeah,
I've also lost, like I've lost people, relationships, and lost people to addiction. Um and there have been times where I would be like, I think my grief would really lean into anger a lot because I didn't know how to grieve.
mm,
I literally started to actively, consciously try to grieve last summer for the first time. And, I get caught up in the stories and the injustice of things and whatever. But I mean, like, that's also just my finite little human brain deciding what is and isn't right, right? Like, these aren't my
yeah,
timelines. I don't get to decide how things go. But something that really helped me, and maybe this was why I was able to actually let myself grieve last time. I have a really wonderful carpal tunnel doctor, and he does these revolutionary treatments that no one else in our entire province is doing.
wow,
And when I first met him, I said, like, well, like, tell me about you. Like, how do you end up being like the guy who does carpal tunnel of all things? And he said, well, I specialize in two things, pain and addiction. I said, well, that's really interesting. Like, how does that happen? And he said, because pain causes addiction. If you can fix one, the other is often, remedied. And when he kind of like framed it that way, I was like, oh my gosh. And, I think about the person that I lost most recently. He was a sensitive soul. He was, very attuned. And I think that that can be really overwhelming. And I think it can cause
Mhm.
pain and anxiety and all these things. And, of course, we seek reprieve. It's
Yeah.
anything to just, lighten it a little bit. And I guess while as I'm saying this, I'm coming back to our conversation at the start about like that compassion and that
Mhm.
ability to feel and see beyond yourself and to understand like, okay, these are the things that are happening, and also simultaneously hold, and these are my needs too. Like we can
Yeah.
see both, right? And it's having the space to hold both of this person is in pain and that's what's causing these things, and this person's also causing pain, and this is what I have to do for myself at the same time.
Right.
They're two very hard truths to hold simultaneously.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's there is something about people like you, Corey, who do this work, who have these compassionate hearts. Um, and I don't know what it is, but it just seems like on a soul level, you get a longer list of things that need to get done in this lifetime, right? And like, because I would consider myself in a similar place where I just got a bit of a laundry list of what my soul needed to do in this lifetime. And sometimes I get really mad and I create a bit of a victim story around it, which I don't hear you doing, but I do. And then I realize is that it had to be me. And I think,
Mhm.
with all the things that you're talking about, it had to be you. We are, we're rewriting generations of stories, of energies that are passed on, of patterns and dynamics. And someone has to be the one who can transmute it. And for whatever reason, in this lifetime, it's us. And I think the fact
Yeah.
that you keep doing it, you keep showing up, and you do it with such grace
Oh,
is a really
thank you.
commendable thing.
I don't know how else to do it. I actually have on my tattooed on my leg, Grace. Um, God, what is on my leg? Faith. Faith, faith, grace, and believe. They're on the back of my leg, so I don't see it regularly, but I had that tattooed right after my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Those are three words that are part of they're my core of who I am. Um, and I function from those points because I don't know how to otherwise. But I know my journey has, in looking back, I can see in retrospect, I wasn't meant to be or have babies. And you and I've talked about that journey of mine. And I became a mother of 3 stepchildren who needed a mom. Their mom was not involved. And I look back and go, oh, that's part of it. I had the option, I have the gift to provide an example of a loving mother figure to 3 human beings, souls who needed that. And then what we've talked about here. So, that was my first 50 years. I'm just like, okay, what's the next going to look like? Because I'd like to rest for a bit.
Oh yeah, rest. What is this rest you speak of?
Uh,
I'm
well,
serious now
man,
that you
my
bring.
first 50 were full. Come on, guys. Can
Yeah,
I
could just
catch a break now?
like, yeah, exactly. Could I just have not like front loaded all of the work and I just get to cruise for the rest of my
Right?
days? So since you brought
Yeah.
age into it, I'm super curious because I know like Saturn return has been, I've seen Saturn return and also something about women turning 40. There is something about those periods where the line gets drawn and like zero fucks are given. How old were you when
Yeah.
you decided like, where the boundaries just started to become like the way?
50.
It was 50 for you. Interesting.
100% when I turned 50. 40, I was still people pleasing. I'm sorry for my space that I occupy on this planet. You know, I would say 40 would be that first prong, that career prong
Mm,
of hard boundaries here with my career. And then 50 is my really strong boundaries of nope. And I'm not taking on your energy or your shenanigans or whatever else you're going to show up or project on me. I'm Teflon. Absolutely not. Keep moving. Just
you
keep
didn't
on
get the
moving.
Teflon from me, did you?
I don't think so.
It's
No.
something I used to teach it. I've
I've
never heard anyone else say it, but it's something I used to teach in one of my programs because I used to do that with a family member who was a very big projector of their shit. And every
oh.
time that I would show up for like a dinner or whatever, I'd be like, I am Teflon. I am Teflon. I was like my mantra. So anything they'd project would just zoop and slide right back off. So when you said it, I was like, did I?
I don't recall. I don't
Love
know
it.
where I got. I think I was looking at, I might have been when I was looking at one of our frying pans and it was just like something just slid right off it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's great. And I just, since then, I've just I use it with stuff. I realize after going through losing my parents that my brain does not work the same way.
Mm,
That's one thing I'll say. The trauma and the grief has really affected the way my brain works. And I've had to try to figure out how to be a type A personality and a project program manager when it is no longer functioning the way it used to. So I say in a lot of meetings, I apologize. Can you refresh my memory? My mind is Teflon right now. And I just lost it. So I use that a lot in meetings. But I may have learned it from you. I'm not sure, but I use it and I love it.
oh, it's just such a vivid thing, right? As soon as you say it, even without any context, people are like, oh yeah, I get that. I totally see it. I think
Yeah.
for
So I
me,
think 40 to
my best
50 was my
40,
window to
50.
answer your question. Yeah.
For me, I don't think it was an age thing. It was, I had a mental breakdown 10 years ago. And so I was 33, just before I turned 33, or just after I turned 33. And life was just completely bananas. And then it got to be like, I was just so incredibly anxious that I had to have a boundary because I had nothing else to give. So there was
Mm,
no ability to people please. There was no ability to put anyone above myself. Because I had nothing. It was just like, can I get out of this bed today?
yeah.
Um, and I think that when the more we can normalize these conversations, the less extreme it has to be before we start to actually
Mhm.
implement these things um and make them our way of navigating the world so that we can
Mhm.
care for ourselves and still get to show up for the people that we love and still get to do the work that we enjoy and whatever else. It shouldn't have to be at our expense.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
And there's many times I woke up and I had no spoons. I had 0 spoons for my day.
Yep.
Um, but I just got to figure out how to have maybe just 1 spoon just to show up,
Yep.
feed myself, hydrate, and just show up.
I
Um,
had made a therapist a commitment that I would leave the house every day. And sometimes that meant I stood in the backyard.
yeah.
And it was like, check. I saw the moon tonight. Like that, yes, it's 10 o'clock at
Yeah.
night. And I said it would be today, and I haven't gone out yet. Okay, I'm gonna stand in the backyard and see the moon. But I think that there's something about being in that place where you start to build more trust in being able to show up for yourself. And
Hmm.
slowly the spoons return, ideally,
Yeah.
for most of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nicole, before we wrap anything up, did you have anything that you wanted to ask Corey? I know we usually have like space for a Q&A and we kind of yacked through it. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss you if you did.
I no, I don't have any questions. It was beautiful to witness your story. It touched me in a million different ways and echoed things in my own life. So it just I think it kind of reaffirmed, around boundaries, really how they come, especially for me with like codependency. I've also had to take care of parents and had those sort of work situations and people with addiction in my life. And I think the same thing had followed. I still was always trying to be like the good one to do all the things. And like you said, apologize for taking up space. So it just really hit my heart and made me realize how far I've come and give me some strength to maybe get better at it. So thank you. Yeah.
And you're not alone.
Yes.
And that's what I love about this, Serena, is as women, we feel oftentimes very alone in our feelings, in our experiences. And we as women are, the nurturers, the gatherers, one would say. But in these types of life experiences, sometimes we all feel like we're just sitting on an island and we're not having those conversations, those deep conversations when you feel the feels and you look across the table for someone and they can go, yeah, I see you. Because I felt very alone through all of these experiences. And so I think another part of that is sharing, just to let other people know you're not alone at all. We're out here.
All the islands start coming together. I mean, that's kind of the whole reason we have the membership in the first place. Because sometimes we don't have the support in our everyday lives where we get to be held in these experiences, where we get to have it echoed back to us that, yeah, me too. But in this space, we get to be that for each other, which I think is one of my favorite parts of it anyway. It's just like the gift of being vulnerable and it being safe to be vulnerable, and also you are not alone. Like I see myself in your story, and there's something in each and every member, even though we're coming from different places in the world and different walks of life and different experiences. There are certain themes that are just universal no matter where we are. And it's really beautiful to get to spend time in a space where those ahas and those realizations are dropping in, and where we can feel less isolated, and particularly during hard stuff and good stuff too. It's nice to come together, but yeah, and the hard stuff as well.
Also, I just want to say that in like listening to each other in our stories too, like there's just so much compassion that I feel in my heart for your story, and I feel the things, and then it makes me have to look at myself, and that's the thing I think I was lacking, was giving myself compassion for the things that I have kind of gone through. So it is so important when we share like that, because how could we give that to others and not to ourselves?
I love that you brought that in, because it is so much easier to externalize compassion for some reason, and then being like, oh, wait a minute. If her and I are having the same experience and I can have compassion for her, then how am I not holding that for myself?
Yeah.
That's a really
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Right. I have so appreciated you trusting us with your story, you bringing so much authenticity and vulnerability and truth to this conversation. And I really do believe that that's how the changes happen, is when, we have those brave voices who are able to speak it out loud. And I'm just really grateful that you shared it with us and in our space. I really
thank you for having me. It's been an honor, and I appreciate you as well. Thank you for having me.
You're amazing. Okay.
Who are you?
Well, we will wrap that up for now. We will be back again next month with another divine dialogue. Thank you so much for being with us today and for being part of this magical conversation.